Is 16 gigs of RAM actually enough for a Mac, or should you upgrade to 24? And why is everyone praising the new MacBook Neo when it only has 8 gigs of unified memory? Buying a MacBook right now is absurdly confusing, and after going down that rabbit hole myself a few months ago, here is what you might actually need and what's a complete waste of your money. First of all, what is unified memory and how is it different from regular RAM? Apple's unified memory is not the same thing as traditional PC RAM. To make it simple, I want you to imagine a city, and a standard computer, your processor, CPU, and your graphics chip, GPU, live in separate neighborhoods. They each have their own memory pools. So if your graphics card needs to render something your processor just worked on, it has to physically copy the data from system RAM into video RAM, or VRAM. So if your graphics card needs to render something your processor just worked on, it has to physically copy that data from the system RAM into video RAM, or VRAM. That process creates a bottleneck and wastes time. But Apple Silicon works in a very different way. Instead of separating everything, Apple built the CPU, the GPU, and the memory into one single chip package. They all share a single pool of high-speed memory. So instead of living in different neighborhoods, they're now friends living in the same house. So if the GPU needs data that the CPU was just working on, it doesn't need to copy it because it can simply access it. That shared pool is called Unified Memory Architecture, or UMA. And because data doesn't have to travel back and forth, your Mac can perform tasks much faster and more efficiently than a traditional PC with the same numerical amount of RAM. Now, this efficiency is where Apple's marketing gets a little tricky. You've probably heard people claim that 8 gigs of unified memory is like 16 gigs of RAM on a PC, and that's not entirely accurate. Speed and efficiency are not the same thing as capacity. If you think of memory like a desk, unified memory just makes your desk very organized. It makes everything you need easily accessible without having to walk across the room to get something. But if you have an 8 gig desk, you still have a small desk. The moment you open 30 Chrome tabs, start streaming music, editing a high-resolution video, and if you throw a video call on top, that small desk gets completely cluttered. It doesn't matter how fast you can access something on that desk, at some point you simply run out of space, and when that desk fills up, your Mac starts swapping memory. It takes whatever you aren't actively using and dumps it onto your Mac's storage drive, the SSD, to free up some breathing room. And because Apple's storage drives are insanely fast, your Mac might not freeze or crash instantly, but behind the scenes, it's constantly moving files and data back and forth, and if you keep pushing it, eventually you'll hit a wall. Apps will start lagging. Browser tabs will reload when you click them, and eventually you'll get that your system has run out of application memory error message. So that brings us to the start of this year, the $599 MacBook Neo. Apple basically took Pro chip, the iPhone 16 Pro processor, and put it inside a 13-inch aluminum laptop with a fixed, non-upgradable 8 gigs of RAM. And surprisingly, many tech reviewers said that 8 gigs is actually enough, almost in unison. And I hate to admit it, but they're kinda right? Well, let me elaborate. If your day consists of writing, working with spreadsheets, watching videos, hopping on quick Zoom calls, or keeping a handful of tabs open, then MacBook Neo actually makes sense. The single-core performance on that chip is fast enough for everyday tasks, and it genuinely feels like a decent laptop. So for students, writers, or anyone who just wants a rock-solid machine for casual and non-demanding tasks, 8 gigs on the Neo can be more than enough, but the problems begin the moment you try to push it even a little bit. If you start, say, mixing a 40-track song with tons of plugins, or running a complex Photoshop project, or try editing a 4K timeline, then that 8 gigs of unified memory becomes a real bottleneck. The Mac will start swapping memory, which can cause buggy behavior in apps, like browser tabs that you were just using a few minutes ago will reload if you open them again, because the Mac would need to free up any memory that's currently not being used. And that's my problem with all those tech reviews. The new MacBook Neo is a great machine, but It's not an end-all be-all, so if you were hoping to get the new MacBook Neo to save some money, yet still be able to rock 4K timelines while exporting orchestral songs, you will be disappointed. So what if you need something more powerful? Surely 16 gigs should be enough, right? And actually, for most people watching this video, the answer is yes. Remember that desk analogy from earlier. Upgrading to 16 gigs basically doubles your desk size. And suddenly, you can have a ton of tabs open, a Zoom call running on a second monitor, Apple Music or Spotify playing in the background, and your Mac will feel fine. Your Mac won't need any extra memory, which means your internal hard drive won't be under any unnecessary workload, and everything will feel responsive. But importantly, 16 gigs will give you actual space to do creative or demanding work. For example, if you're a musician and tend to make projects with 30 or so tracks, all processed with a handful of third-party plugins, 16 gigs will actually handle it pretty well. Or if you make YouTube videos and need to color grade your footage, a 16 gig Mac will actually be the sweet spot for most tasks like that. On top of 16 gigs, you get Apple Silicon engines that will actually surprise you. But before we go on and talk about who actually needs anything beyond 16 gigs, make sure to subscribe for more tech content and join our Patreon for exclusive early access. Thank you. Now, what if you do intensive daily work for clients or run massive local AI models? Well, that's when paying for a Pro or upgrading past 16 gigs of unified memory actually gets justified. But, and this is important, you need to be honest with yourself about what you actually do on your laptop. Not imagine what you will need in 6, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years when things finally take off. What you actually do now. Because 24 gigs of unified memory and beyond is the power user territory. Let me give you an example. I'm a musician. I make music for video games, YouTube channels, sing, and I make music that gets commercially released, sometimes even through labels. My genre spread is wide and ranges from orchestral to wild genre mixes, where 60 and 70 tracks is normal. On top of that, I run multiple channels myself, so I edit every video and make every thumbnail myself. And I need to do all of that without fighting the system or constantly stressing whether another instance of contact in my Logic Pro session will be what causes the dreaded system overload message. And I'm not even touching LLMs. Those things have a notorious reputation for chewing through RAM for a good reason. Those models live directly inside your unified memory. The more RAM you have, the larger the models you can actually run locally without facing any limitations. If none of that sounds like what you do every day, spending the extra money to upgrade past 16 gigs isn't going to make your Mac feel any faster. So don't buy for what you think you will need. Buy only for what you know you already need. I've been Michael. See you in the next one.